Welcome to Capitol Catch-Up, your deep dive into the latest action from the halls of Congress. I am Victor.
And I am Leanie. Today, we are unpacking a major lineup of legislative proposals, ranging from sweeping fiscal restructuring to targeted relief for small businesses, farmers, and families.
Let us start with one of the most significant and wide-ranging pieces of legislation on the table, House Bill 1. This is a comprehensive reconciliation bill for the 119th Congress, and it is tied directly to House Concurrent Resolution 14.
Now, Victor, for our listeners who might not be familiar with the term, reconciliation is a very specific, complex legislative procedure. It allows Congress to fast-track high-priority budget-related bills, meaning they can pass with a simple majority in the Senate and are not subject to a filibuster.
Exactly, and House Bill 1 uses this process to propose massive economic, regulatory, and fiscal restructuring. It touches on agriculture, defense, energy, and taxation. For instance, it introduces a major shift in energy policy by prioritizing oil, gas, and coal development, while actually rescinding funding for several climate-related and environmental programs.
It also includes a sweeping tax reform package. This would eliminate taxes on tips and overtime, terminate numerous green energy subsidies, and aim to provide permanent tax relief for middle-class families and businesses. On the spending side, the bill seeks to reduce federal outlays through Medicaid reforms, including stricter eligibility redeterminations and community engagement requirements, alongside modifications to SNAP work requirements and increased funding for military readiness and shipbuilding.
It is a massive policy agenda centered on deregulation and domestic energy. But while House Bill 1 looks at the broad economy, House Bill 915, also known as the Small Business Technological Act of 2025, zooms in on local businesses.
Yes, this bipartisan effort amends the Small Business Act to explicitly authorize Small Business Administration loans to cover the costs of essential digital tools. We are talking about business software, cloud computing services, and AI-driven management tools.
The idea is to help small businesses modernize their daily operations, like payroll, human resources, accounting, and inventory management. Crucially, the bill clarifies that these loans are for operational integration, not for research and development. It is about helping everyday business owners stay competitive.
Speaking of funding, let us look at the federal budget itself. Congress is working on major funding packages for the 2027 fiscal year. First is House Bill 9310, the Department of Homeland Security Appropriations Act.
This bill outlines funding for core enforcement agencies, specifically U.S. Customs and Border Protection and U.S. Immigration and Customs Enforcement, along with intelligence operations and departmental management. But what stands out here is the level of congressional oversight.
Absolutely. It mandates highly detailed reporting on staffing, budget execution, acquisition programs, and pilot programs. It even sets strict requirements for the Secretary of Homeland Security to respond to congressional inquiries. There is also specific funding earmarked for body-worn cameras for law enforcement, investigations into forced child labor, and intellectual property rights enforcement.
There is also House Bill 9260, which covers appropriations for the Department of Labor and related agencies for the fiscal year ending September 30th, 2027. This bill directs significant resources toward workforce development, training services, and unemployment insurance.
It supports key initiatives like the Workforce Innovation and Opportunity Act and the National Apprenticeship Act, plus funding for Job Corps operations, veterans, employment services, and programs to help individuals with disabilities participate in the labor force. To make sure this money is used efficiently, the bill allows for consolidated grants for outlying areas and the ability to transfer funds for operational flexibility.
Now, when we talk about Homeland Security and law enforcement, we also have to look at Senate Bill 2, the Secure America Act. This is a comprehensive package that allocates billions of dollars through fiscal year 2029 to bolster border security and immigration enforcement.
Senate Bill 2 specifically targets the expansion and training of personnel for U.S. Customs and Border Protection and U.S. Immigration and Customs Enforcement. It also invests heavily in advanced surveillance technology, artificial intelligence, and anti-narcotics efforts.
Beyond general enforcement, the Secure America Act earmarks resources to combat child sexual exploitation. It also mandates stricter protocols for the detention and removal of unlawful aliens, particularly in jurisdictions that do not cooperate with federal immigration authorities.
On the law enforcement front, there is also Senate Bill 4446, known as the Preventing Rogue Equipment for Synthetic Substances Act, or the PRESS Act. This bill, introduced on April 30, 2026, takes aim at the illicit production of counterfeit drugs by strengthening the Controlled Substances Act.
It establishes extraterritorial jurisdiction, which means the United States can penalize the manufacture and distribution of pill presses, encapsulating machines, and related equipment abroad, if there is intent or knowledge that they will be used to produce illegal controlled substances for importation into the United States. Depending on the scale of the violation, offenders could face prison sentences ranging from 8 to 20 years. The bill also directs the United States Sentencing Commission to update federal guidelines to reflect these new priorities.
Let us shift gears to transportation and infrastructure. We have two bills that focus on giving local authorities more flexibility and independence. First is Senate Bill 1733, the Highway Funding Transferability Improvement Act, introduced by Senators Kramer and also Brooks.
This bill proposes an amendment to federal law that would raise the limit on transferring federal aid highway funds from 50% to 75%. This gives states much more discretion to reallocate their federal transportation resources to meet specific local infrastructure needs. It is currently with the Committee on Environment and Public Works.
Meanwhile, House Bill 5656 addresses transportation in the territories. It proposes amending federal law to grant Puerto Rico and the United States Virgin Islands the authority to issue commercial driver's licenses.
To make this transition smooth, the bill directs the Federal Motor Carrier Safety Administration to assist these territories in meeting federal standards. It also provides a 5-year grace period that exempts them from federal funding penalties while they work toward regulatory compliance. The goal is to fully integrate them into the National Commercial Vehicle Safety Framework.
Now let us talk about agriculture. Specialty crop producers have been facing some unique challenges, and there are two Senate bills designed to help them. Senate Bill 4660, the Economic Relief for Specialty Crops Act, was introduced on June 2, 2026. It proposes a $5 billion appropriation for fiscal year 2027 to provide direct financial assistance to specialty crop producers through existing Department of Agriculture programs.
And to build on that, Senators Schiff and Padilla introduced Senate Bill 4661, the Ensuring Disaster Recovery and Resilience for Specialty Crops Act. This bill proposes a permanent federal framework to provide direct assistance when producers are hit by adverse events like economic crises or market disruptions.
Because specialty crops have uniquely high values and elevated input costs, this bill mandates that the Secretary of Agriculture calculate assistance using historical sales and specific payment factors. It also sets clear eligibility requirements and payment limits, with special provisions for farming-dependent entities.
Moving on to families and social welfare, Senate Bill 162 is the Recruiting Families Using Data Act of 2025. This legislation aims to strengthen the foster care system by requiring states to develop data-driven family partnership plans to recruit, screen, and retain foster and adoptive parents.
Under this act, states must consult with birth, kinship, and foster families, as well as youth who have lived experience in the system. The goals are to increase placement stability, prioritize kinship care, and reduce reliance on congregate care. States will also have to report annually on foster family capacity, barriers to retention, and their efforts to recruit families that reflect the racial and ethnic diversity of the children in care. These requirements are set to take effect in October 2027.
There is also Senate Bill 4638, the Promoting Strong Native Families and Children Act, which focuses on tribal child welfare systems. It proposes major reforms to the Social Security Act to empower Indian tribes.
Right. It increases tribal set-asides for child welfare and family support programs from 3% to 5% and allows tribes to receive social services block grants directly. It also permits the waiver or modification of matching fund requirements to better align with tribal cultural and economic circumstances, and allows states to count visits by tribal caseworkers toward mandatory monthly visits.
We also have Senate Bill 4437, the Puppy Protection Act of 2026, introduced by Senator Durbin and a bipartisan group of co-sponsors. This bill amends the Animal Welfare Act to set strict new standards for commercial dog dealers.
It requires improvements like solid flooring, specific indoor space dimensions, temperature control, daily exercise, and consistent human socialization. It also sets limits on breeding age and frequency, mandates veterinary screenings, and requires dealers to make reasonable efforts to find humane placements for retired breeding dogs. The Secretary of Agriculture must finalize these regulations within 18 months of enactment.
Finally, let us touch on some regional and historical recognition. First, Senate Bill 4573, the Regional Great Lakes Partnership Act of 2026, introduced by Senators Peters and Moreno. This bill formally designates the Great Lakes Commission, which represents the 8 states bordering the Great Lakes, as a regional Great Lakes partnership, integrating it into the federal framework for regional partnerships.
And we have Senate Bill 567, the first Rhode Island Regiment Congressional Gold Medal Act. This bill honors one of the first integrated military units in American history, which was recruited in 1778 during the Revolutionary War and included men of African, European, and indigenous descent, with enslaved participants promised their freedom.
The bill authorizes a Congressional Gold Medal to be struck by the Secretary of the Treasury and housed at the Rhode Island State Library, with bronze duplicates available for sale to the public, formally acknowledging their bravery at the Battle of Rhode Island.
As we wrap up today's episode, listeners should watch out for how these bills progress through their respective committees, particularly the Environment and Public Works Committee for Highway Funding and the Agriculture Committee for Specialty Crop Relief. We will also be watching the implementation details for the foster care data rules as we head toward 2027.
Thank you for tuning in to Capital Catch-Up. We will see you next time.
Goodbye.